Hey everybody, Nephew SIG Automation Package Management Subproject, April 27th, and we're just going to go through the board. So let me pull that up. Share. You know what, I'll put it in a separate window, and then if we open up any issues, we'll see them. Okay. Okay, so who do we have? I don't see Sandeep, so we'll just move on past this. I think, yeah, Wim, you commented, but hopefully we'll see something from Sandeep soon. For me on this, so I actually am making some progress on this. Okay, yeah, I put a link here if anybody's curious. It's nowhere near done. I just started the conversion stuff, but Simon, he said he's going to be a little bit late, so we'll see if he comes in. So this one, I'm actually prioritizing the package variant set stuff first, because it'll let us. Well, I don't know. I don't know which should be prioritized, but I still expect to be able to finish both this sprint. That's my goal. So I can probably move this into to-do because I'm not working on it right at this minute. I think this is, yeah, Vish and Ravi. Did you guys get a chance to sync up?
Yeah. So, yes, if you click on that. So.
Oh, okay, cool.
What we have done with the understanding of what is written there in that particular issue and what we could guide, this is what me and Ravi looked at, and said that this is the information that can be given. So the next step is, because that will give you what we need to understand here is that the packages are going to be published basically, and it will be retrieved from GitHub.
Excellent. Okay.
Right. And then if you wanted to set up any cluster to be a management cluster, these are the basic functions that can be used. And
okay.
However, if somebody wants to use the Ansible scripts as a second iteration, what we'll add to this is, hey, this is one way that if you wanted to set up any management cluster that has it's either kind or non-kind. When I say non-kind, please.
Not cruel.
Another cluster. This is what you probably need to do in order to get there. However, there are also scripts out there that you can use. That'll be the next part of it, which I will update later.
So as long as what we're doing is right, if we use the packages in those scripts in Ansible, then when we change the package, we don't have to make changes to those, right? So that's the
yeah. And then what I was thinking is we could even create packages for the artifacts that are in Ansible. So if we slightly move to packages there, right? So we could, and then write functions to mutate them. So, but step by step. So first baby steps, but so that's my dream. If you can do more and more of this Ansible into a kept package file, you could get some of this stuff. Of course, the more.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's great stuff. It's exactly the way I was thinking.
So this is more like an MVP, right? This is the information for somebody looking for information. Hey, I got a cluster. I want to make this an FE management cluster. Yeah, follow these steps. And now somebody is like, oh, how can I actually create this cluster? I want to create a client cluster or something as well. The next level of steps I'm going to add is, me and Ravi will add is, if you were to want to do that, this is the Ansible script wherein we'll point out exactly what needs to be probably commented out in order to get there to do that. That is the next sequence of steps I'm going to add.
So here's one thing, Vish, if you want to take it a step further, is if we have in the package you're installing here, the Nephew system package, or maybe as a separate package, we have a controller that can create kind clusters based on a KRM resource. Then creating those clusters just becomes applying another package with that KRM resource.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Victor, you're here, right? So we discussed that a little bit. So instead of your tool that you're building, if you could do a small controller on top of a kind cluster, it would do a great job for us.
Yeah, that's something that I have to start thinking about it, how to create that particular controller.
And it could be very, very simple. You take the kind input as your YAML, right? And just push that you just spin up a kind cluster, something like that. It would be, I mean, if you want, I can discuss with you if you want, but that would be really helpful for us because we could just then put it into a package and with the necessary parameters, and through a function, we mutate the parameter, and then we spin up clusters with kind, and maybe we can start with kind, and then later we do other ones, and so on and so forth. So we can gradually get to a full KRM system.
Cool. I was going to suggest this, John, what you're doing. If you can provide your comments, and I'm glad you're doing that, you and Wim both. And then we can evaluate for R1, what is the minimum we need, and do we need to enhance it further, right? Sort of. I don't know if what you're saying, John or Wim, if you guys are looking, if you want to do everything in R1, that's great too. Or, if you want other people to come on board and make this like, hey, this is a low-hanging fruit for the next person to come on and to contribute. Some of your ideas can also be applied, is what I'm thinking. So at least,
yeah, no, I would love for anybody to do it. Right? So we talked about kind clusters. Now we already have this is we've talked about this way back, and Sandeep looked at this some when he provisioned EKS clusters. Right, there already are projects that provision EKS clusters, GKE clusters, EKS clusters. So theoretically, right, if we deploy those in our management cluster, then we can create packages that can create clusters in R1 because the machinery is all the same.
Okay.
So then the second step is where I started pasting in here, and I'll finish the comment later, is, okay, if we really want to join a workload cluster to an FEO thing, we need a repository for it. So we need a KRM resource that can generate a repository. So I Googled around a couple of weeks ago and found this one. It's under my name. This is my fork of it, because it was kind of a few years old and not really maintained. But the idea would be that, right, now you can have, this is for GitHub, but you could create one for Git too. So that would be a nice thing. If we did one for kind and we did one for Git, a controller for Git that creates repositories.
Yeah.
Then you create a package becomes that it creates a workload cluster. It creates a repository. It includes the repository resource for Porch that registers that repository with Porch. So the actuator creates the cluster, the actuator creates the repository is registered with Porch. It's now in our, the thing that we're missing is the networking, right? But like, it's basically now just by deploying a package, we can add as many clusters as we want, and it automatically joins the Nephew thing, and you can give it a label, and you can do all the stuff, and we can deploy workloads on it. So this is that swim lane one, right, being solved by the same mechanisms that we're using to solve swim lane 2.
Okay.
Which is the dream, right? So.
Cool. So at this point of time, the instructions are very generic, whether you have kind or non-kind.
Right.
It works, and we'll add to it as we go along. Comments.
Just Peach, I have just one comment on something that I just discussed with Wim during KeepCon. So one of the corner cases is especially when you have to customize the web UI. I have faced with some issues, especially to modify the service type of the web UI, and also modifying the content of a config map using KPT functions. So maybe it's something that we can discuss later, but
yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you about that, because so this is also gets back, Victor, you're bringing up a point of like, so the framework is here, but there's a lot of gaps still.
Mhm.
So one of the gaps is, what kind of manipulations can you do to the application config, which is stored in a config map and which might not be structured in KRM. So that's our swim lane 3, and we're like kind of deferring that and kind of hacking around it or working around it by like writing custom functions that could read in a specific application's config and rewrite it. Like that's kind of my strategy right now. I don't think it's a great long-term strategy, but it's for our network functions, because the idea would be that eventually network functions can be configured with KRM directly, but it's a workaround. It's an escape hatch is to write a function. So yeah, let's have a discussion about that. But those are the gaps in this process we're trying to identify. Yeah.
By the way, Victor, did you try the search and replace? Victor identified 2 cases basically. One, I think search and replace works. The other case we did not. I don't know whether you checked, Victor, whether search and replace work, but there is this big config map blob, and he wants to change the parameter in there. I don't know whether search and replace works in that scenario.
It's
function config, you mean?
I've struggled.
No. Search and replace. There is a few functions, because Victor's use case is the following. It was mainly for the UI, right? The use case.
Yes.
He had to change some parameter from the YAML files. One, I think, I don't know whether you tried, Victor, but with search and replace, I think this must work. If that doesn't work, it's a bug in search and replace.
Correct. Because I've used search and replace as a part of the coming up to speed on KPT, and it seems to work. That is probably where the value is, right? That you're able to go.
Yes, but there was one case where so Victor showed me a YAML file with a big config map blob, right? So all the data is a string. And the question is, can you also manipulate that? But if that doesn't work, maybe we should focus on solving that particular problem, or find a function that does that one, and basically use it as a string blob and does a regular expression or something like that, and solves that problem. But okay.
Yeah. So and the other thing is regarding the installer that I have created. Like yeah, basically the code is there. Like I'm just fighting with the internal procedure to release the code. So I think it is covering all these instructions that you have included. So for me, it's like
Victor, one of the things that you should that is not there, I think, based on this here, is that actually have a controller that configures the kind cluster, for example. That what you have a Go file or a Go program that basically create kind clusters, but it would be ideal that you change that Go program to a controller-ish approach. So you put a KRM. So you have, at the moment, you have your kind YAML, right, that you actually use to configure it. Have a CRD that represents that, and that spins up a kind cluster. Then you could do exactly this. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, what you're saying is like from the installer, we have to create like the cluster. I mean, we don't have to depend on the previous creation of the cluster, right? So we have to trigger the creation of the cluster to the installer.
No, wait. So the idea here is to use cap packages, right, to install. So in other words, what we would have to do is create a cap package that has a kind cluster configuration, which basically is then triggering a control. Of course, you need something that is initially there. So you need one management cluster, but that's it, right?
Yeah.
If you want, I can maybe discuss it.
Yeah, let's discuss this in another. Victor, I'm around
because it's
this afternoon probably, if you want to talk, or tomorrow.
Yeah, sounds great.
And but yeah, I think we can. This is like moving well in the direction we want. I saw Simon jump in, so
I just want to have a closing comment on that 47. I know you guys are talking about Gitty and kind. So a gap that I found was that when using Clab, kind clusters, and Gitty, Podman doesn't work well. So, FYI, basically, which means at some point of time when we want to actually increase our coverage, right now we are using Ubuntu. I'm thinking at some point of time we want to actually cover other open source distributions as well, like Fedora and other container runtimes, like, not just Docker, but Podman. Some of this will there'll be gaps. FYI, no action right now.
Yeah.
We can make progress, but something to think about before we jump in with some specialized solutions to think about support. So
okay, yeah. Well, any of these things become like, right? It becomes that there'll be an option like the general architecture would be Nephew, but like if Google's packaging and distributing Nephew, we might pick, to use cloud source repositories, which is our cloud root repository, rather than GitHub or Gitee, right? Somebody else might, and we would choose to provision GKE or GDCE clusters. Whereas, obviously, if Amazon were packaging it and selling it, they would choose some other solutions there, right? Or if Red Hat were doing it, they'd choose some other solutions. But the principles are all the same, and you'd have different packages for those different ones, but the thing would basically work the same. But yes, we have to be able to support all of those things, so that's good to know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Simon.
Hello there. So, as some of you might mention, I have written a very long comment that explains the very long merge train that would be required to make this elegant. So, in short, today I tried using the workaround that Morten suggested. Fortunately, it does not super solve the problem, but actually tackles something else. So what my suggestion is, we're going to run it just without deep copy for now. I'm making a big to-do. As soon as the merge train is done, I'm fixing the deep copy. It should not have a big impact on the existing code by then. Yeah, but I now need to implement basically what Morten suggested, which is the idea that instead of parsing the KPT file that is inside the package revision resources, you actually directly edit the YAML, and then it keeps like the structure that it had before, and it retains comments that happen in the KPT file.
So you use the cube object stuff like we're doing in the functions, is how you'd probably do that.
Yeah, so
by the way, Simon, there is a Isti, maybe it's good to team up with Isti on it, because he just created a function that allows to manipulate, or you can set a new YAML object retaining all the comments with lists and maps and everything.
Yeah, I could you send me the name again, or say the name again?
Steve, I'll give you the PR. So there's a PR, probably easier. You see everything. Yeah.
Even better. Yeah. So the idea that Morten suggested is basically using k-YAML. So it has like a couple of funcs on YAML nodes to insert, append, and all of these kind of stuff. And that's his idea, and I've been working on that. And I think
Isti has done exactly that. I think
okay.
I think you may be able to use that works in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's a stack of technologies here. KYAML. On top of KYAML, there's the kept function SDK, and then we've built something on top of that, or Wim and Isti have built something on top of that even makes it easier. So definitely, rather than going down at this level, if you use their stuff, your life will probably be a lot easier.
Yeah, I'll definitely have a look. That's perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like, hey, one of these things got merged, so that's good.
Yeah, that's the one I put in. The others are out of our control. No, not true. The second
Natasha,
one I also put in.
I mean, like you said,
this one is also by me, fair enough. The second one is also by me, but the third one is not. Someone was faster, but this again is waiting on a release from API machinery.
Okay, this will be a while then.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome though. That's great.
Perfect.
So before you came in, I was talking about, I've actually been working on the package variant set V1 Alpha 2 stuff. So we have a V1 Alpha 1 that's already released in Porch. V1 Alpha 2 is what's in the design document, like, so that's the one I'm implementing. I'm modifying it to do that. Rather than working on the package injection, because I figured if you finish this, then this might be, if you have time still, this sprint, something you can start poking at, because you've been in that code, you'll have some familiarity with it.
Oh, nice. That is actually a really good idea. Yeah. So, okay, then you can assign me to the 43 or add me as one of the 5 people that's already assigned.
Well,
but that's actually a really good idea.
Folks aren't able to do it, so we'll probably, oops, that's not how I do that.
Yeah, then I'll work on that after the other one is finished. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'll take care of that. John, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I just found
All
it.
right,
Sorry.
thank you.
Okay.
I haven't heard from Anne on this. I'm not sure if she's here. So. Cool. Okay. What did I do to the board? Okay.
I think it's just double filter, and there's no issue.
There we
Yeah.
go. Okay. Awesome. Okay, this one I don't think we need to. I think this was being. It was,
I think that one is done. I think almost. Yeah.
Yeah. We were gonna move these into somewhere. Or Victor, you shared this.
I just want to mention a little bit. I was just doing some testing yesterday, and I noticed, especially the problems with the pre-5G has some kernel restrictions and also requires like a kernel module. So if we go through using containers, I don't want to start like again the containers versus VMs, but yeah, we have to keep in mind that pre-5G has P5GC has these dependencies. So
Okay, so like this is a thing that we should highlight as this is a problem we're going to need to solve generally. I would put it in the workload cluster group, but the problem of like, oh, I want to deploy this network function on this particular node. That means I need to do some kernel, load some kernel module or whatever. Like we have to have some solution for that in general, and that's probably something the workload cluster team should work on. Yeah, Vish.
Well, in this context is why one of the things I'd been mentioning was earlier, instead of just using kind clusters, we also should be using regular clusters too, and which I was playing with last week, where I was able to actually get, using kubeadmin, I was able to bring up 4 VMs. I used kubeadmin and 4 VMs in Google Cloud, and I was able to replicate everything that we were able to do on kind clusters for scenarios that cannot just work with kind clusters. Just more like forward thinking, if something breaks.
Yeah. So I don't know. So GKE doesn't support Multus.
It doesn't matter. You have VM. If you have a VM, you can install Multus, because that is one of the things that we came to know. At least I came to know from Stephen Wong. Initially, we were thinking of using GKE clusters, but now we are bringing up VMs, and on those VMs, we are running
creating your own open source Kubernetes on top of those VMs.
Yeah. So GCP VM. Basically, I'm using the account, the pure faculty account that was created for workshop, and I'm
right. Well, see, I'm thinking about how we could do that with KRM, and that might be, we might want to look at, so remember we were talking just a minute ago about provisioning kind clusters with KRM. Well, we could provision potentially other kind of clusters with cluster API. So somebody else has brought this up, right? So if we bring up cluster API.
Yes, Wim also mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah. I've done that. I've done that already, John. It works.
Okay. So maybe rather than the building, does cluster API create kind clusters? Is there kind of
no? So kind is a limit. So I would rather, I would love that Victor, if he wants, solves that, because then we can. Cluster API doesn't do kind, but it does Google, AWS, the whole. It does bare metal, a whole jebang, right? So it does a whole fleet of things, but it doesn't use the managed Kubernetes services. It uses a VM approach and then runs on top. But so you have KRM for it, right? So you could use that for it. That solves Vish problem, because and then kubedm is done for you and all of that stuff, right? So, but kind is uncovered, is an open. At least I'm not aware that there is something that does that.
So the other point I wanted to mention, Victor, is if it is particular to any network function, bringing it up. I mean, I think Orange has done it, has brought up these functions in the same VM.
But this kernel issue came up also with them, right? So there was two things that we had to fix. One is the security parameter in the pod spec, and the second is you had to load, what is it, GTP library or something like that, right? So,
Yeah.
so they even brought it up during their session.
Right. That's what I was going to mention. If you could see that recording, that's what I was going to get to.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to ask is there a, and this is where I get like, maybe we should defer this because it's not this subgroup, but like, do we have a solution in Kubernetes generally ecosystem for this kind of problem? Like Kubernetes itself allows you to say, configure a subset of kernel settings, but do we have is there some ecosystem node agent that lets you do this kind of thing out there? And that would be the workload. I would ask that the workload cluster team, and we can talk to Tal, like kind of investigates that if there's a.
There is the node feature discovery, which basically it is deployed for.
Tell you. Yeah.
It's going to help you the scheduler to make better decisions based on the kernel requirements. That's for the kernel, but for kernel modules, I don't think that we have that level of awareness.
Okay. So, all right. So
I have one more question. What would be a typical modification that you would want to run? Maybe then I understand it better.
To load a module. So there's a specific module that has to be loaded from the kernel to be able to make this function work. Now, for me, it's a bit of an exception, but.
So,
okay.
Well, it's not really like, so there is work in upstream Kubernetes around like, device, what do they call it? I mean, there's the device manager, which allows you to like, so for instance, this happens a lot with GPUs, right? Or a DPU, like you need a special module, especially the NVIDIA ones need like, so that tends to put requirements. I want to run this workload that needs this particular device, that's, or this particular card. And in order to do that, right, I need to be able to discover that, and the scheduler needs to be able to do it. And there's a bunch of work being done. Patrick Oley from Intel is doing a ton of work in that area, but that's going to be the full version of that we need for the telco type workloads is probably 2+ years out from core Kubernetes. So the question is, what do we have today to work around these limitations?
Because I remember that we have some guys that work on operating system manager, which is like a sub-project at Kubernetes, but it's open source. But I don't know if it supports kernel. But I will just post the link, or I will have a look after that.
Yeah, and let's reach out to Tal and the workload cluster folks, because that's really where this falls. Okay, sorry, trying to move it along because I'm.
One comment there in that picture. Yeah, you seem to have interconnected G node Bs. I mean, generally the G node B interfaces are like, the XN interfaces. I'm not sure, just to be aligned with TGPP. Now you call it as an N2 bridge, and then you connected your AMF G node that aligns, but then you have G node B to G node B2. I'm not sure what that is supposed to do.
It's for handovers normally, Ravi, right? So there is sometimes communication between the.
Yeah, no. Then you should just make that N2/XN bridge. Then it becomes G node. I mean, it aligns with what TGPP states. It's normally you have it on XN interface. That's XN that happens between G node. That bypasses the
Can you
core.
put a comment on the issue maybe? Because
I'll do that. No problem.
That would be helpful. Yeah.
And also, Ravi, I provide the link of the document. So I mean, I don't know if who have. So you can also modify the diagram. So and add more things if you consider rather.
Sure. I'll do. No problem. Yes.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Do we have? I don't see Steve in here.
I'm going to review that document and have topology by tomorrow latest. So I will.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if he's made more progress on it or not. Okay, and I don't see Eric or Piotr.
Ganesh is here.
I think this was this one was the orange people were working on. Did you say Bala Ganesh is here? Ganesh.
Yeah.
Oh, for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as we speak, I see chatter between Chris Fry and Chandra.
Chandra, yeah.
Any other status?
Yeah. So as I know, Chandra, we have set up the Kubernetes environment and the development environment. I think following the conversations, Chandra was able to completely set up the GUI development environment. So currently, I think they're discussing about finding a time to understand the requirement for this specific task that is on the screen. So I think from what that was the last message I saw in the conversation. So as I understand, the status is like Chandra, and we are able to follow the develop GUI code, etc. Once the development environment set up, once we understand the requirements, we should be, at least Chandra should be ready for development. Like,
okay,
it should be able to start development. So that's where we are at. So once we can set a time to discuss more detail on what is expected of this task, for example, how the GUI should look, what are all the various boxes, icons, all these things on the GUI that has to be there. I think we should be set up. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. That sounds great. Excellent. Awesome. Well, on this one, I think is there more to cover here, folks, or did we talk about it already in the other issue?
Yeah, Victor is here. You want to add anything, Victor?
Well, probably need to refresh my mind what we have in there, but yeah, let's keep that discussion going like offline.
Okay. Yeah, we talked about it already, I think. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Seems like we're making progress. I think we can. Well, you said you'd. So I'll move this over here, Simon, just for you now, and I can probably take me off of it. But anyway, okay, excellent. Thank you, everybody. Let's keep working, and we'll talk on Tuesday next week.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.